thing I think to start with is, if you start from a recovery perspective, it's a fundamentally different model from a clinical treatment model. I'm not going to talk about chronic relapsing conditions. When we talk about recovery, there's some really important differences that happen, and they're characterised in this slide, which basically is, let's start from the assumption that the relationship part is fundamental. But it's not a power relationship, because the relationship supports recovery as a peer relationship primarily. And so there's a switch in our understanding of who helps, not the expert, but the community and the peer and the family. Second part of this is that basically we understand recovery as something that switches from a deficits model, we don't count the number of pathologies, to a strengths model. And long-term recovery is better predicted on the number of strengths you have than the comorbidities, the dual diagnosis, the multiple pathologies you have to overcome. Third, recovery is something that happens between people, not just inside people's heads or bodies. It's an intrinsically, fundamentally social process, which is why the notion of family is absolutely critical to our understanding. It happens in a context and in a family context, and I'll say a bit more about what I mean about that in a second. Fourthly, it's something where the peer plays a huge part in it. People learn how to recover. Fundamentally and most commonly, we talk about the social contagion of recovery as something that transmits from one person in recovery to another. That it's a model about visibility, attractiveness. Fundamentally, and it's not especially scientific, I recover through saying, I want what you've got, and I'll do what you do to have what you have. The breadth and depth of internal and external resources that can be drawn upon to initiate and sustain recovery from addictive behaviours. As I mentioned, stable recovery is best predicted on the basis of assets, not pathologies. Now, the hypothesis for today is basically, what does that mean from a family perspective? What is recovery from a family perspective? And we would define that as being addictive behaviour is a trauma that happens to families. And the family recovery is therefore post-traumatic growth in that family following the adversity of addictive behaviours. But one of the things we know from both addiction recovery and from post-traumatic growth is it is not about going back to where you were to start with. It is about being better than well. The journey to recovery is not a journey to the starting point, because that's what started you in your addictive journey. It is about familial growth, familial change, and that tends to involve three core elements. Changing your relationship and the family's relationship to the behaviour, global health and well-being, and active citizenship and participation in communities. There are three fundamental premises to how and why people recover. We can frame it in two ways: jobs, friends and houses, or somewhere to live, someone to love, something to do. And stigma closes those doors. And stigma is not just experienced by the addict, it's experienced by the family. The whole idea of an inclusive recovery city, and we now have 29 inclusive recovery cities across 8 European countries, is that we create the conditions that change the likelihood of recovery happening. The idea of this is that you identify, access and mobilise community resources, that family members can act as key catalysts for community engagement and effective destigmatisation.